Framing is a fairly new field of study in communications and part of logic and debate. Sadly, if you aren't aware of how framing works, no logical argument you make will penetrate the population's consciousness. George Lakoff is one of the forerunners in the study of framing and its use of metaphors in the public psyche. A frame is a metaphor filled with nuance and language that is intricately ingrained into the population. Because each idea is so well understood by the populace, you can discuss complex concepts in very simple words and even sound bites, and people will get what you are saying. It can be used to teach or convey a message, or sadly, frames can be used to spread a false narrative and lead people, without making logical fallacies of your own, to encourage them to make logical fallacies for you. Many times also, they will use analogies to narrow the debate, and then make people forget that they are just analogies, and making logical sound arguments even when the limits to the analogy's usefulness is broken. An example he uses in his book, Don't Think About an Elephant, which is a book discussing why the Democrats kept losing to the Republicans until 2006, even when they had more facts on their side than the GOP. I don't want to get into a partisan discussion here or sound bias, but as the GOP in the last decade has become more and more the religious right, most of my viewers will probably be of either the liberal or libertarian persuasion. The examples he uses involves the home and parenting models in the minds of all of us. That seems to be a narrative that's extremely well-known, well-understood, emotional, and nuanced. There are two different models of parenting in the American narrative. There is the patriarchal family model that involves a strong, protecting, but punishing and absolute father, and there is the nurturing parent model, where the two main founding ideas of this parent is empathy and responsibility and making tough decisions to be the better adult. It's quite probable that America's two-party system as opposed to multi-party systems helps the GOP to control the frame even more. All of us are well familiar with both models thanks to movies and literature. None of us have to have it explained to us, so they can skip it and just use the language we know. It is the fact that it is so ingrained into us that we don't realize what is happening when the frame is being used on us. It narrows the field of focus of reality without you realizing it, and you've limited your options in the argument to a small range of argument choices. So you of course choose the logical of the two ideas without realizing that there is much more to the argument than you can grasp, but learning that would not work in a soundbite, but more an hour-long lecture. It's this groundwork in the mind that is why scientists only now are beginning to realize that they need to create a narrative for why science is real and important to the average person, which is something they've kind of neglected for the past 20 years and are now facing angry backlash, along with the resurgence of pseudoscience, creationism, and new phenomena of climate change denialism. Being taught a false version of evolution and creationism, I chose, of course, creationism. I had no idea the topic was so much broader, and I had much more options than what I was told. The patriarchal framework has been part of the American narrative from its conception. However, with the rise of science, it began to lose credibility among the more liberal religious until child psychologist Dr. James Dobson gave it sciencey-sounding legitimacy. His book, Dare to Discipline, and others, resurrects the biblical narrative that the father is the strong head of the household, the wife and children are submissive, he is firm and his word is law. The mindset stems from the biblical concept that all children begin as evil, and it takes a firm, painful discipline to beat the evil out of them. Spanking, pain, and punishment is considered tough love. God sending people to hell and let them suffer is viewed as love by this model. If you give them an inch or let them get away with anything, then you have spoiled them. If you give them anything they didn't earn, they are spoiled. As soon as they are adults, assuming they aren't daughters, and then as soon as they marry, you are no longer responsible for them. And if they are good, disciplined people, they will be prosperous in life. If they get anything they didn't earn, they will not only be lazy, but also evil sinners, because the sin wasn't beaten out of them enough. Dobson either missed the class explaining the point of peer-reviewed research in psychology, or in more likelihood, he had his beliefs and went to get his degree to give his own beliefs legitimacy. Either way, he's one of the worst child psychologists out there because nothing he proposes is backed by modern peer-reviewed psychology. If you are only aware of the patriarchal model, this makes logical sense. Sadly, there have been also a lot of bad parenting books based on fluff bunny ideas, only loosely backed by science, that give the nurturing parent model a bad name. People follow Dobson with all the best intentions. They truly love their kids, and they see how bad parents with no discipline raise their kids, so they don't want their kids to end up like that. They are completely unaware that there are scientific alternatives to spanking. Of course, it involves changing and preparing yourself before you have children or during child raising, which is hard because child rearing is so distracting. The nurturing parent model involves the narrative as the child starts out as good but needs gentle guidance and education. The child is a blank slate and a sponge ready to absorb and be filled with new ideas. Each child is different, and the parent has to take the responsibility to learn child psychology tactics as well as child-specific tactics. The parent must have empathy and be in touch with the child's emotions and help to cultivate curiosity, generosity, love of learning, and empathy, leading by example. The use of knowledge as opposed to force as a way to lead. The parent must be the grown-up and take responsibility to be the adult and the peacemaker, or the protector when the situation deems itself necessary, so the child can learn by example. The patriarchal model doesn't require leading by example, though it's recommended. It's more of a side recommendation and not essential, so it's easy for the strong parent to forget and just be heavy-handed and use the do what I say, not what I do mentality. When you don't know this method, or have only seen bad versions of this style of parenting, just like bad watered-down quote-mined versions of evolution, it sounds like the biblical idea is much better. Sadly, because the nurturing parent, when caricaturized, can be framed as weak and naive or feminine, and the nurturing parent requires learning and tactics, it can be used to create and propagate the anti-intellectualism that permeates our society. Even though the nurturing parent requires making better informed, nuanced, and flexible decisions instead of tough, one-size-fits-all hammer punishment. The nurturing parent takes a lot more work and is more difficult and stronger emotionally, but thinking is hard and wimpy, so just be a tough, badass, loner, distant father figure because it appears easier and more logical compared to the oversimplified nurturing parent narrative. The GOP grabbed this frame when the religious institutions decided to support the Republican Party. They used the language of the religious right and got a lot of power out of it. They called the smaller nations emerging nations, indicating that they were children and needed a strong father parenting, forcing their morals on their children. They also created the narrative that severe punishment is needed as opposed to thoughtful, preventative, educational measures like what the nurturing parent calls for. Punishment and brute force are the only way, as opposed to a last resort, which the nurturing parent considers a necessary tool, but only when all other options are off the table. The fatherly system believes that the punishment system is the first line of defense and is completely and only vaguely aware of the other methods of parenting. The fatherly system is also why gay marriage is so vilified by the right. Unmanly parent equals spoiling child, which prevents evil from being beaten out of them, which leads to a breakdown of society. The nurturing parent is genderless and is completely compatible with gay parents. Empathy and responsibility are completely genderless. They are just what it means to be a good parent.